So I'm Stefan Tompson. We're here for the Institute of New Europe in a series of discussions with experts from the 12 3Cs member states. And today I'm speaking with Dr. Tomáš Strážay from Slovakia. Tomáš, maybe we could start with a little introduction about yourself, about your work, and the think tank that you work for.
Yes, I'm heading Slovak Foreign Policy Association, which is the oldest foreign policy think tank in Slovakia. And my personal focus is on European enlargement, regional cooperation, and bilateral relations of Slovakia with the neighboring countries.
And of course, amongst that area of expertise, I'm hoping that you'll be able to illuminate us about the 3Cs initiative. So the focus of the conversations that we're having is around the current state of economic affairs and cooperation. Could you perhaps highlight roughly what the current state of economic cooperation between Slovakia and other 3Cs countries is, where those closest economic ties are? I'm assuming obviously Slovakia's ties are closest with Czechia, but if you could tell us a little bit about that regional cooperation, where Slovak's interest lies, its exports, its imports, just to sort of highlight an overview of the current situation, that would be very useful.
Well, I'm not an economist. I'm expert on foreign policy, so just I can provide you with the expertise from this angle. But
Sure.
definitely, I can tell you that behind Germany, which is far the most important trade partner for Slovakia and one of the most important investors, our trade has been developed quite rapidly, I would say, with the other three so-called Visegrad countries, which also are part of the Three Seas initiative. And the fourth neighbor, Austria, which also somehow counts as a member of Three Seas initiative, is also an important trade partner for Slovakia. So all in all, I would say that yes, the neighbors who are part of the Three Seas initiative do play an important role in our economy, in our exports, in our trade, and also in our investments. And yes, it is exactly Germany and the three V4 countries that are the most important trade partners.
Yeah, Germany is one of those countries that really does play an overwhelmingly huge role in the region, especially in the trade balance. Um, And it is interesting as well with Austria that you mentioned, which is sort of when Central and Eastern Europe is discussed, Austria is very often slightly bypassed. It's sort of slightly forgotten, and it's kind of a, a sort of overlooked member of the 3Cs, maybe because it's a little bit different from the 11 other countries in many ways. I don't know if you agree with that analysis or that point of view.
Well, definitely, it is the country that is not actually in the same group as the other countries of the Three Seas initiative. Austria joined the European Union back in 1995, right, which makes it the oldest EU member among all the Three Seas initiative countries. It also has some other specifics. Uh, I don't, and hopefully we all don't like, to divide the EU members in these two groups, like new and old members. But if we would have done so, then Austria would have definitely belonged to the group of these old member countries. There are also some other specifics that can be actually noticed, especially when it comes to Slovakia and the Czech Republic, because these three countries are grouped together as the ones who perhaps have not shown so huge enthusiasm so far when it comes to the development of cooperation in the Three Seas initiative format. And there are different reasons for that.
So this is one of the things, the kind of broad strokes of this conversation is sort of what are the 3Cs initiative. It's been going for a few years. 2015 the concept was created. 2016 it's launched. We're now a few years in. There's a few huge infrastructural projects that are underground. There's a 3Cs fund. What are the key? But we're still obviously in very very early stages of the project. It's still unknown to the broader public. It's mostly a topic for experts and analysts and the political class. What are the current sort of major opportunities for the format? Or conversely, what are the major challenges ahead of us?
Well, I would say that the cooperation, the format itself, is still in the making. It has achieved already some interesting achievements, but I would say when it comes to its main focus, actually to uh, somehow support cooperation and enhance cooperation of those countries that are somehow on the eastern border of the European Union, that it definitely makes sense to support this initiative, as it makes sense to support other initiatives that have, been here longer than the Three Seas initiative itself, like some of the projects that are now considered and promoted. As the Three Seas initiative project started some years already, some years ago already, these infrastructure projects like Via Carpathia, it's not an idea that would be exclusively connected to the Three Seas initiative, neither when we speak about the enhancing of the energy cooperation and building of interconnectors. But still, it is very good that the Three Seas has such an important sectoral focus, that it is an initiative that aims to deepen cooperation among those countries that take part of the initiative. And I consider it as an important and additional, at the same time, additional instrument for regional cooperation in broadly understand Central or Southeastern Europe.
Hmm. And what are some of the major challenges that lie ahead in making it a reality? What is standing in the way?
Well, I think that we are still in the process of finding appropriate projects, and the number of projects should be bigger, and somehow more projects should be present and actually looking for the support. I also think that we find the challenge of not having adequate number of private investors who would invest in the Three Seas investment fund. We also know that there are some countries, and namely, I come back to Austria, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, who haven't contributed. To the Three Seas investment fund. So these are the challenges that need to be tackled. I would also say that what might be needed is a more precise focus on communication. So to avoid any misunderstandings when it comes to the goals of Three Seas initiative, and to count each of the member as a valuable contribution to the initiative. So I think the challenges are there, but all of them are, so to say, easy to be dealt with.
So why would you say the obviously Slovakia has not joined the investment fund? Why is that, and what could be done to convince them to join the fund?
Well, despite the fact that the contribution is quite modest, actually, it's 20 million of euro, if I am not mistaken. Still, there are some voices in Slovakia that say that before investing in the fund, certain kind of guarantees perhaps should be made that would enable Slovak subjects that would, provide or submit their projects to the Three Seas Initiative fund to receive the funding for these projects. Because when it comes to the current arrangements, actually one can't guarantee that the funds will be distributed equally. Basically, the main intention is to finance the best projects, regardless of the most prospective projects, regardless of the fact from which country do they come from. So I think it's also the matter of communication, because as far as I know, Slovakia also submitted the new list of projects that might be considered for support in the 3Cs investment fund, but there have been certain lack of communication when it comes to the fund management and so on and so forth. So there are some issues that need to be solved, but as I said, I don't think that these are so important that couldn't be overcome.
And how do you think that the current geopolitical situation, I mean, obviously referring to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how has this shifted, or has it shifted, Slovak approach to cooperation with the region? Um, I mean, obviously, the Visegrad 4 format is suddenly become a little bit trickier, I think, for obvious reasons. But has it, for example, shifted attitudes towards the three Cs?
Well, as I said, those who focus on the 3Cs initiative in Slovakia, those stakeholders would strictly divide, the sectoral orientation of the 3Cs, which is very much preferred in Slovakia, from any political connotations or context, which obviously doesn't mean that there wouldn't be the support for a more intensive cooperation with Ukraine. Slovakia is 100% for it, definitely. But I think that we all in the 3Cs, in the 3Cs format, we have to look for the best ways how to engage Ukraine in the cooperation and how enable it to benefit from the cooperation, either as a full member or as an observer or any other form, I would say. So generally, I have to say that in Slovakia, the 3Cs initiative is not actually considered to be an important topic, neither in public nor in political discourse, which also somehow contributes to the overall understanding of the initiative and its goals.
That's very interesting. And what is the attitude of Slovakia towards Poland's role in the project? I mean, is there some concern, for example, that this is an overly Polish-led initiative, that this overly represents Polish interests, for example?
Well, I have to say that our diplomacy and the government considers Poland to be a very important partner, and the breakup of the Russian aggression actually brought Poland closer to us in many regards. But on the other hand, I don't think that there is a conviction that it would be dominated by Poland, the initiative. Those stakeholders, and there are, just to repeat, only a very few of them in Slovakia who deal with the 3Cs initiative on a regular basis, would perhaps say that and admit that definitely Poland, together with Croatia, were the forefathers, so to say, of the initiative, and there is no need to change that fact. But the question is how to convince and how to make the cooperation really efficient and effective for all members that are, present in it. And I think this question still remains without an appropriate answer, which might also be, the case of the work in progress character of the overall initiative for the moment.
I see. That's actually a very interesting answer. It's been very interesting to see how different the approaches to the topic are, depending on what country the given person I've been speaking to has been from, and the sort of the levels of enthusiasm have been really very different. It's quite interesting because I was expecting, um, for some reason, I sort of, maybe because Slovakia is sort of part of the Visegrad 4, and it's such a close neighbor of Poland. I was sort of expecting more enthusiasm towards it from Slovakia. Um, So it's very interesting. It's very interesting to hear that. And now I suppose this really takes me to the next steps. I mean, you've been sort of painting very broad brushstrokes about the topic. So what could be done in practice? Like what sort of concrete steps could be done to convince Slovakia that this is a good initiative and that this is something that should be pursued?
Just one sentence regarding the previous actually part. By no means I wanted to tell that Slovakia is opposing the Three Seas initiative.
No,
On the
that's not what I
contrary,
was
we
saying
are in
either.
favor, but a little
Yeah,
bit, hesitating
cautiously.
still because we want to clarify some issues, I would say.
Sure.
And I also have to admit that I am not speaking on behalf of the government. I am an analyst. So this is also my personal, actually, view. And when it comes to very concrete, actually, proposals, from the side of Slovakia, it would be definitely to focus 100% on sectoral cooperation, not on institutional arrangements so much.
Explain that. Could you break that down? Sectoral rather than institutional. Could you explain that more in depth?
Yes, I mean the three dimensions or the three pillars on which the Three Seas initiative was or has been built since the very beginning: the digitalization, energy, and transport. Right, these are very, very important for any country, including Slovakia. But this is also the reason why we would focus more on the intensification of ties and cooperation in these particular fields, and to focus on the concrete projects in these particular fields, while we are not perhaps so much enthusiastic and so convinced that the institutional framework, like the secretariat, for instance, should be built first, and then the cooperation would become, more efficient. We are rather opting for a more flexible character of the initiative, and which would bring tangible results, basically. Because as for now, we have had attempts to build the secretariat. We also have the Forum of the Regions of the Three Seas initiative. We have business forum. We have annual summits. These are important, actually, platforms for discussion and for deepening the cooperation, but still the core is in the sectors that have been identified very wisely, I would say. So that's the standpoint we have, perhaps.
I see. That's very interesting. No, of course I didn't want to imply that you were opposed in any way to the initiative. It was more a sense of sort of general kind of. I think there's the Polish national character. I do think there is a deep romanticism to the Poles, and I think it's funny because I don't think they have a reputation as such, but I think we are quite enthusiastic about things. I'm certainly quite enthusiastic about the idea, even though I am aware that it's obviously in very very early stages. And that, of course, I mean, from a purely practical perspective, the fund itself, which is meant to fund all the projects, has as of now officially less than €1 billion in it, and the combined cost of all the projects that have been written out and sort of are all seemingly incredibly useful infrastructural developments would cost, according to some sources, in excess of 600 billion. So I mean, it is. We are a long way from being able to actually fund all the things that we've written out.
That's true. One thing needs to be mentioned, I guess, also that most of the countries, exactly all of them, with the exception of Austria, are the beneficiaries when it comes to the funding from the EU. And we are lucky to occupy this position for the moment. This position might change in early future, and we would need additional funding or the new sources of funding. And in this regard, I really see the role for the Three Seas initiative and the Three Seas initiative fund when the funding from the EU and from the external sources would stop, then it would be good to have an instrument to finance the regional projects and to develop them further. And I think this is one of the significance the Three Seas initiative has, and this should be also spread throughout the countries that are perhaps labeled as not so huge enthusiasts when it comes to the 3SI for the moment.
That's actually also that's a very interesting take of looking at it as a useful vehicle and a useful instrument in future times to come. What I wanted to ask you, sort of, just on a broader, going towards leaning into your area of expertise, just the whole, the going back, not necessarily in the context of the three Cs, but just of our region of Central and Eastern Europe. What do you think are the obviously this is it's a difficult question in the sense of I'm trying to phrase it in the right way. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia obviously is a great tragedy, but for some, I mean, Central and Eastern Europe has obviously, as it's become, we're we're NATO's eastern flank. We are the eastern border of the European Union, and the region's been really at the forefront of the humanitarian aid, of weapon deliveries to Ukraine, of accepting refugees, of transfer of humanitarian supply, of oil, of weapons, as I mentioned before. Um, what do you think are the sort of, how will this change the region? How has this conflict changed the region, and what are the sort of, obviously the word opportunity is in the context of Ukraine's tragedy is a really unfortunate word, but I think you understand the gist of the question.
Well, definitely, we are the closest neighbors of Ukraine, together with the Baltic states and Romania. So there is natural, actually, link to Ukraine. It's quite natural that we do support the Ukrainian fight against Russian aggression. In many ways, I don't like, to introduce any rankings in this regard, which reminds rather contest than the serious work or serious analysis. But it really needs to be said that the countries in the eastern flank really do their best, I would say, with some small exceptions, but they do their best in order to support Ukraine. And I think this brought us closer to each other, definitely, because we face the same challenges, the same threats, we can say openly. We are very close to the front line, right? That's why the B9, the Bucharest 9 initiative, which actually includes those countries on the eastern flank of NATO, has become significantly more important than it was perhaps 2 or 3 years ago. And it also showed that the significance of this part of Europe was perhaps undervalued, and their opinion was undervalued by some of the countries of the so-called old EU member states. So this also needs to be taken into the consideration. But I think what is really needed regarding Ukraine is a common European approach, common
Sure.
EU approach. And in this regard, we should do our best in order to contribute as we can to the European voice and European instruments that can actually bring Ukraine closer or definitely to our side.
And do you think that that over the last few months that Central and Eastern European voices, it's a very common criticism to say that, as you've pointed out, that that divide, that unfortunate divide of old EU, new EU, and there's a common complaint that the new EU members, their voices are not necessarily heard to the same extent as old EU voices, and there's certainly an argument to be made that the European Union is very strongly dominated by France and by Germany. I mean, even if only by virtue of the size of their economies and their populations and just the size of their countries, they're much larger countries than ours. But do you think that there's a case to be made that over the last few months that our voices, Central and Eastern European voices, have been heard louder in Brussels, and that our voice, I mean, especially with statements like Ursula von der Leyen saying we should have listened to the Baltics, to Poland, to people who know Russia. The Finnish Prime Minister recently echoed a similar statement in Strasbourg. Is there a case to be made that indeed our voices are finally being heard to a greater extent?
I would say that yes, there are some areas when the voice is now louder. I would say when it comes to the appeals on sanctions and further actually sanctions imposed on Russia, then definitely this voice is originated in our region. When it comes to more intensive military support to Ukraine, obviously Poland is playing the leading role, but even the smaller neighbors of Poland from the eastern flank do the same. Also, when it comes to accepting Ukraine as a candidate to the European Union, the idea originated again in this region. And, well, I would say that it also showed a very close cooperation of the countries in the region when it comes to the support, but also the drafting, of the document, because Ursula von der Leyen used the documents that were really developed here in the countries of the region. So this is very, very, I would say, clear example that the voice is louder now and perhaps should be even more loud. But on the other hand, I would strictly oppose any attempts to make this, issue of not being heard and a political issue and misuse it in a populist way, because
Sure.
it requires a discussion, and what is again needed is a joint common European approach, and all the voices, all the countries are needed. We can't do that alone. We in Central Europe, we need the partners from other EU member states. So that's why I'm underlying so much, and once again, the common European approach.
No, of course it is. It is very, very important that to keep Europe united rather than disjointed, especially at a time of crisis like this, especially with war on our eastern border and as well as a looming energy crisis and potentially a recession around the corner. If anything, now is the time for unity. Dr. Tamash, I mean, actually, thank you. The final part, it was very nice to see you get a little bit more, and you sounded more enthusiastic. I think I don't know if I'm correct, but it seemed almost as if there was some personal satisfaction in there, as you were saying that our voices were getting louder, which was very very nice to see and really wonderful to hear. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, and let's keep our fingers crossed, actually.
Wonderful. Thank you.